One last question. Suppose, Lord Russell, this film were to be looked at by our descendants, like a Dead Sea Scroll in 1,000 years' time. What would you think it's worth telling that generation about the life you've lived and the lessons you've learned from it?
I should like to say two things. One intellectual and one moral. The intellectual thing I should want to say to them is this. When you are studying any matter or considering any philosophy, ask yourself only what are the facts and what is the truth that the facts bear out. Never let yourself be diverted either by what you would wish to believe or by what you think would have beneficent social effects if it were believed. But look only and solely at what are the facts. That is the intellectual thing that I should wish to say. The moral thing I should wish to say to them is very simple. I should say, love is wise, hatred is foolish. In this world, which is getting more and more closely interconnected, we have to learn to tolerate each other. We have to learn to put up with the fact that some people say things that we don't like. We can only live together in that way. And if we are to live together and not die together, we must learn a kind of charity and a kind of tolerance, which is absolutely vital to the continuation of human life on this planet.
If politics is to become scientific, and if the event is not to be constantly surprising, it is imperative that our political thinking should penetrate more deeply into the springs of human action. What is the influence of hunger upon slogans? How does their effectiveness fluctuate with the number of calories in your diet? If one man offers you democracy and another offers you a bag of grain, at what stage of starvation will you prefer the grain to the vote? Such questions are far too little considered. All human activity is prompted by desire. There is a wholly fallacious theory advanced by some earnest moralists to the effect that it is possible to resist desire in the interest of duty and moral principle. I say this is fallacious, not because no man ever acts from a sense of duty, but because duty has no hold on him unless he desires to be dutiful. If you wish to know what men will do, you must know not only or principally their material circumstances, but rather the whole system of their desires with their relative.
Right, you're listening to Matt Sergiou, our Chris, and myself. We're back again with, I suppose this is Ash's addendum, although it's an addendum of an addendum, probably we're going to get into number 3 or 2.5, because we did an intro to the addendum. So you try work it out, because we can't. I'm in my bunker with a gimp behind me. Matt's in his shed tonight, actually.
No, I'm not in the shed tonight. Hello, everybody. By the way, I'm not in the shed today because it's so far out away from the house, and I've got an internet booster there, but I'm not sure whether it'll cut out. It'll, if it's going to be strong enough. So I thought I'd come home. I'm in the spare room. I'm in the spare room.
Sounds really good.
I'm going to say that. Yeah, sounds really good.
Because I've closed the windows and I put the blinds down to sort of to get to deaden the sound. Hey?
Yeah. I've got him to turn his microphone round as well, because like Mark, he was telling me why Mark and him hold the microphone to the side, and because I was saying that your microphone will sound better if you point it to your face. And he said, well, it's a DJ thing. Go on, explain.
Well, I think it's a theory, because I didn't even realise it until you said. And when you said it was me and Mark that do it, I thought, well, what have we both got in common? Well, we're both DJs. So I'm thinking it's when you're in a club and you're talking louder on a microphone than you would, say, in this situation. Yeah. There's more danger if you speak into the front of the microphone, that when you say the letter P and it's going to pop the mic. So you turn it to the side, so you're not going straight into the mic and making it go bang. So
I actually noticed you instinctively moved your mouth to the side there when you said P.
Yeah, you see.
Yeah.
Even when you said it, when you were explaining it, you had P.
Yeah. What a prick. What an absolute.
Yeah.
So what a pillock.
Yeah. So we've got quite a lot of stuff. We're just hitting record, and we're talking about this part 2. Because anyway, I think we're going to get into some stuff. Chris has got a 2 litre of wine.
No, I've got a bottle behind me, just depending how long we're going for.
Well, you might need 6 litres.
So what you're saying is, Chris, you're not going to open that at all tonight.
I never said that. I'm giving myself a bit of time, because if it goes over 2 hours,
all right. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is going to go off into. This is going to go off into tangents, because it always does when we're here doing this together.
I hope so, because that's why we do it.
Yeah, exactly. What's the point?
You reminded of us a thing that Mike Williams said. What did Mike Williams said? Which was a dent in our not a dent, but
I took it as quite comforting when he said this, because I sometimes am mindful of the fact that I do go on. I don't think I go on, but sometimes I get a little bit paranoid that maybe I do go on a little bit when I go off into these podcasts, and
now you're going on about going on.
Yeah, exactly. You see what I mean? Exactly. So I do get a bit paranoid about it, and I was listening to you guys talking to Mike. I think the last episode you did with him, or the one before, and you said something along the lines of, well, Mike, there's a lot of information, and I don't think we're going to get through it in this particular episode. And he said, don't worry, guys, however long it takes. In a really hypnotic voice as well. And when he said that, and when he said that, I thought, oh, that's great. And that kind of gave me license to just prattle on and on and on.
Eyes going round like that snake off Jungle Book. Yeah.
I thought, that's good. Well, that's giving me an excuse to keep going on and on and on then. Yeah.
So we did the last one in December, and we basically talked for about 3 hours about Bertrand Russell.
Yeah,
and
that wasn't the intention.
No, it wasn't. No.
No.
Bertrand Russell and his links to New World Order, and obviously to the Beatles and Paul McCartney in particular. But you found some other information out after that, so we'll start with that.
Okay, so just to recap, so basically Bertrand Russell is this so-called great thinker, this philosopher of the 20th century who within the mainstream is revered to this very day, and he was certainly revered during his lifetime. He died in 1970, I think. Viewed as a great thinker, a pioneer of philosophical views, viewed as a great man of a great man, a man of peace and all of this. And he was the co-founder in the late 50s and the early 60s. And we talked about this in the previous episode we did. He was the co-founder of the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, which is otherwise known as the CND. And this was in the late 50s, early 60s. And why this was important within the context of the Beatles and the 60s counterculture is because it's been people who were the key movers and shakers of the 60s UK counterculture, on reflection decades later, have looked back on that era, the creation of the CND, thanks to Bertrand Russell, and have claimed that was kind of like the beginning of what 6, 7, 8 years later would become the so-called counterculture era, the hippie era of 60s London. Because a lot of the people, the key movers and shakers, the people that made that UK counterculture movement happen, came from those rallies and those marches that the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament was organising in the late 50s, early 60s. And what they were saying was that what was so successful about these marches and these rallies against... So basically, the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, otherwise known as the CND, which was born within this environment of the so-called Cold War, was there to campaign against nuclear proliferation, to bring about an end of the building of nuclear weapons by the so-called superpower countries. What was so successful about these rallies and these marches is that it attracted a cross-section of society together, joining together for these marches in London. And so you had priests, teachers, mothers, business people, sort of mixing together, people who wouldn't normally mix together, a cross-section of society. And within that mix, there were the so-called beatniks and the bohemians, people who were on the sort of the fringes of society, who were into the folk music, who were into beat poetry, who was kind of rallying against the so-called establishment and consumerism, which was a rising, which was becoming more and more popular in the 1950s. They were kind of rebelling against that. And in a pre-internet age, where you've got people say you've got a beatnik who's a bohemian, a so-called bohemian who's living in a village in the 1950s. In a pre-internet age, the likelihood is that he probably thinks, or she probably thinks, that they're a rarity. Do you know what I mean? They're probably the only person in a small town or a village that thinks that way, dresses that way, lives that lifestyle, and thinks that they're pretty kind of rare. What they realized when they went along to these marches was that there were other people that were just like them. And these were the proto-hippies. This is what these...
It reminds you of the Laurel Canyon meetups, doesn't it? Where they all appear at a certain time.
Yeah. So they realized they were there when they went to these rallies, and they saw, hey, wait a minute, there's someone who's just like me over there, who's into the same kind of things as me, who's got the same kind of views of life as I have. So it became kind of like a catalyst. And these people are the proto-hippies. And they later many of them became the hippies of the 1960s. And many of the key movers and shakers of the UK counterculture scene in London began their journey as young teenagers, kids, basically, going along to these CND meetings. So basically what Bertrand Russell was, he, whether it was deliberate or not, gave birth to what would become the UK counterculture scene of Great Britain. And he was regarded, and I think I mentioned this in the last episode, he was regarded as a quote unquote, this is what I think, having looked into the 60s counterculture, the UK counterculture scene of London, having looked into it and done a lot of research into it since about 2016. And I mentioned this in the last episode we did. My take on it is, and I think I actually said this, I'm kind of paraphrasing what I said at the time in the previous episode. I think I referred to him as the grandfather of the UK counterculture. I think that's what he was. Since we recorded that episode, I've since found a news article from October 1967 from a newspaper. I think it was the Guardian. And it's from October 1967. And in this article, Russell is labelled a quote-unquote priest and prophet of permissiveness. So this is 1967. This is towards the end of Bertrand Russell's life. He's in his 90s by this point, somewhere between he's in his mid to late 90s. He's approaching 100. And there he is in this news article being labelled a priest and prophet of permissiveness. And he's in this article alongside the Beatles, Bob Dylan, William Blake, the guy who was partly responsible for designing the Sgt. Pepper album cover, and also Allen Ginsberg, these giants of the 1960s so-called counterculture. So he's labelled, this guy in his 90s in this article is being referred to as a priest and prophet of permissiveness. So permissiveness, of course, what I mean by that is that's referring to the decade's liberalisation towards attitudes with regards to drug use, casual sex, helped along by the pill, which became popular in that decade, the loosening of divorce laws, which happened in the UK in that decade. And you might argue that helped to dismantle the values of the so-called traditional family. And there was this man in his 90s, who is regarded as a leading figure in the progression of permissiveness during the 1960s. And what we also mentioned in the previous episode was that Russell was a supporter. So here he is, this man who's held up by the countercultural movement, these young people, this young generation of the 60s who are holding him up as a hero. And he's also a supporter of eugenics and a one world government. And I also mentioned it's this
old eugenics chestnut,
that they all seem to be into. And I mentioned in the last episode, again, I keep referring to the last episode, but this is kind of a recap kind of thing to set the context for what's to come, I think. But I mentioned in the last episode that there was a particular speech where he called for, in order to bring an end, to bring the population down, he said something along the lines of he wanted to, what we need is, to make this happen, we need some kind of biological event of some kind. And I've actually found the quote, because I didn't have the quote then, and I've got it now. And this is from a speech he made in 1949. Okay, this is what he said. He said, "I do not pretend that birth control is the only way in which population can be kept from increasing. There are others, which, one must suppose, opponents of birth control would prefer. War has hitherto been disappointing in this respect, but perhaps bacteriological war may prove more effective. If a Black Death could be spread throughout the world once in every generation, survivors could procreate freely without making the world too full. The state of affairs might be somewhat unpleasant, but what of that? There are three ways of securing a society that shall be stable as regards population. The first is that of birth control. The second, that of infanticide or really destructive wars. And the third, that of general misery, except for a powerful minority."
Okay.
So, I mean, how obvious can you make it? And not only that, but he's actually saying war has been disappointing.
Disappointing.
Wait a minute.
He's campaigning against nuclear war.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I've got another speech, but go for it.
Well, Russell, running parallel with Russell and the eugenics and all the other stuff that they talk about is the Huxleys that was also leading into the same. Julian Huxley was the president of the Eugenics Society, so we know they're intrinsically linked anyway. And I haven't even looked to see if genetically they share the same bloodlines, but I know they've both got royal genetics, so I would hazard a guess that somewhere down the line there's a family link somewhere. But the Huxleys remind me of that. But this guy's campaigning for life. There you go, action for life. Then he's on about culling the population.
Yeah, it's just...
And that
quite
is what happens.
Well.
Quite openly, yeah.
Yeah, quite open. And he's saying general lift a quote out, general misery for everyone except for a powerful minority, he's saying. I mean, how more obvious can you get? You know?
But if you think about Attenborough now, he's got everyone loves him, don't they? He's got the whole he's like a British institution, but he's a fucking eugenist just like him. It's virtually the same kind of character, not the same character, but when he pops it, he's going to be lauded upon, isn't it? Old Attenborough. There's a bloody museum for him here already. But then everyone forgets, but he's a eugenist. Same with,
like Mike says about McCartney, there's going to be a ticker tape parade. Attenborough, there'll be the same thing on a smaller level.
Do you know they're making 4 films about Beatles?
Yeah, they are.
4 different films, one on each character.
Really?
And I think who is it who's doing it? Isn't it?
Sam Mendes.
Sam Mendes is doing it.
Yeah.
Who did the Bond films?
And someone joked. I think I saw it on a forum or something. Someone joked, and how many people aren't going to go and see the Ringo one?
They've got that actor doing him, haven't they, Ringo? He's actually a good actor, isn't he? Is it the Irish guy?
I don't know. I don't watch any films. I still get Empire. I get Empire magazine every month, Matt, and it was in there, and I didn't know he was making a film, but they're making 4 separate films for it about each character. So 4, it's mad. It's absolutely.
Why do you think they keep rolling these films out, Matt? Why do they think they keep having to push these? It's like there's a cult agenda for the last 60 years.
From the Billy Shears book is that they're trying to create a future religion, a religion for the future, which I think is insane. I mean, he does say that, and Mike was talking about it, if you remember, which is, you can't even get your head around it, can you? But they are clearly lauded up. I mean, a new documentary pops up about Paul McCartney every day, doesn't it?
There's been 2 already. There's been 2 already this year, and we're what?
Yeah, I saw a new one the other day. Are they
that really important? Are they that? They're not that important, really.
No, nobody is. Nobody is. But them 4 films, Fatty, are going to take up. I don't know what their plan is, but I would guess that have gone for 2 years at least, 3, maybe even 4 years. So the planning.
That's a big investment as well, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
And for it to get to that level where it's in that magazine, they've been working on that for 2 or 3 years.
Oh yeah, and you'll have 4 years of Beatles, won't you? Or whatever. I don't know what the time scale is, but
I don't know how they're going to roll it out. I've got no idea.
But just to finish off that, we haven't really. I think we'll speak about the Ashes today, are we, Matt? At the end, or not?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I've got one more speech from Bertrand Russell.
Go on,
this is about music. And this is actually about popular music. And again, this is rather kind of James Bond villain-esque, you might say. This is poignant, or creepy and just downright evil, maybe. I prefer that one. This is from 1950, and this is what he said about music and popular music, right? And he said this in 1950. So this is just over a decade before the Beatles and the Stones came along, and about 15 or so years before the so-called counterculture came along. This is what he said. He said, physiology and psychology afford fields for scientific technique which still await development. I think the subject which will be of most importance politically is mass psychology. What is essential in mass psychology is the art of persuasion. What went wrong formerly was that people had read in books that man is a rational animal and framed their arguments on this hypothesis. We now know that limelight and a brass band do more to persuade than can be done by the most elegant train of syllogisms. It may be hoped that in time anybody will be able to persuade anybody of anything if he can catch the patient young and is provided by the state with money and equipment. This subject will make great strides when it's taken up by scientists under a scientific dictatorship. The social psychologists of the future will have a number of classes of school children on whom they will try different methods of producing an unshakable conviction that snow is black. Various results will soon be arrived at. First, that the influence of the home is obstructive. So that ties into the 60s as well. The
what sort of upbringing did he have?
I don't know. Second, that not much can be done unless indoctrination begins before the age of 10. Third, that verses set to music and repeatedly intoned are very effective. Although this science will be diligently studied, it will be rigidly confined to the governing class. The populace will not be allowed to know how its convictions were generated. When the technique has been perfected, every government that has been in charge of education for a generation will be able to control its subjects securely without the need of armies or policemen.
I mean that's straight out the MK Ultra SRA Montauk Project handbook, isn't it?
1984, anything. Could be anything.
All of the above. I mean, before we were coming on, you were talking about the SRA Survivor thing you were watching earlier.
Well, what I was saying is I've listened to a lot of SRS, and you do put it on and you do listen, and I think it's necessary to listen to some of it because you're basically assessing, in your own mind. Well, I do anyway. Is this true? Is it real? Because it's so fantastical, and the people you listen to talking about it, they don't come across as liars or anything. And I think more and more of them are coming out now because going back to when David Icke interviewed Cathy O'Brien and stuff. Yeah. And I think there's been a bit of a, if you imagine if you've been through them situations, them horrible situations, and you hear someone else talk about it, will egg you on to talk about it. So I think it's more and more. Anyway, my point was to you was I've been listening to a few lately. I was listening to a lady and I've heard her before. She told a whole set of different stories, all horrific. But I said to you a while ago, Dom, because I've listened to a few of these, is it seems like they took SRA, satanic ritual abuse, the systems they use to mind control these people. It seems like MK Ultra were just like a scientized version of it. You know what I mean? It took this thing, and I had this lady saying, she was saying that it's an ancient thing that they've done forever, and you can imagine with these satanic families, so it's gone on forever, and obviously. And that was my suspicion a while ago when we were talking about it, and she actually said it. She said they took it, they saw the advantages of it, of having been able to program someone to do something, and the CIA or whoever, which alphabet agency, wanted it for their own use, which is MK Ultra, which makes horrible sense, doesn't it? It's horrible, but it makes sense that they'd want to weaponize basically this ancient ritual. And she was saying that and I've heard other people say this, by the way, that. It's not a choice. It's not like this will work on that guy and this will work on that guy. It works. It just works, And then do
you think there's an opt out? Do you think some people, again, like the mind control that was attempted in 2020, a lot of us saw through that. Fortunately, some of us were seeing through that before it actually happened anyway. But do you think, like, some people can't get hypnotized, some people can't get mind controlled?
Well, apparently the bloodlines, I think, are more susceptible to it. Apparently, that's what they say. I don't know.
And when we say bloodlines, it's important we understand that we're talking of ancient bloodlines.
Well, also
bloodlines.
Also, like Matt said, they got to get them under a certain age. Yeah, I think he's under 7.
I don't think Bertrand Russell means that because he all for love and peace, Chris.
But it would make sense because that's why they're indoctrinated at school with dinosaurs, spaceships, and unicorns. Because it stays with them, doesn't it, forever?
Yeah.
And there is something to that. Show me the boy of 7, I'll show you the man, kind of thing. Is that the same? But you can see what a young kid's going to be like when you see him up to 6, 7 years old, can't you?
Yeah.
But it's horrible to think.
Well, we were talking to Matt. What is it? 300,000 kids go missing in America a year. I mean, that number, 300,000 kids go missing in a year, not in a decade or a century. In a year. I mean, I don't know what it is over here or in Europe or around the world, but anyway.
I mean, and also you listen to these people talk, these SR. What is it? Annette Lucas? Is that the one who talks about it quite a lot as well? So I'm getting her name right.
Yeah.
They all say the same things. They're all very similar stories, and it is amazing that this amount of folk have come out now. There's that lady who was on that guy's channel, Anneke Lucas podcast. She does a podcast, and she was satanically ritually abused. I'd recommend her podcast. It's on YouTube and it's on all the other ones. But she interviews people who've been satanically ritually abused. I mean, it's heavy going stuff. I mean,
yeah, I did read a lot about Kathy O'Brien. I've got her books and stuff like that, but it is hard to read even the interviews that she does, as eloquent as Kathy is. What does stand out though, she names names, doesn't she? She doesn't hold back about naming names.
Kathy O'Brien, yeah.
So does
Annette Lucas.
Yeah, I think I've listened. I think you've sent me a video of her, but and I did listen to some of that. But they do name like presidents and Gerald Ford and Trudeau and people like that. They've never been sued. Nobody's ever come after them.
And also people always ask, how did they get out of it?
Bob Hope. I think she mentioned him as well.
Yeah, Bob Hope. Yeah, and Trudeau's dad, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But people don't believe. Another reason people don't believe it is because, like, well, if this is all true, how did you get out of it? And the point is they let them get out of it because they know no one's going to believe them.
Yeah.
And they also have these suicide programs, so most of them end up killing themselves anyway. A
suicide program? How did you coming up with that one?
I know.
What's your job? I come up with suicide programs.
Well, just if they try to get out of it, they immediately get depressed and they can hurt themselves or whatever.
I mean, somebody who does look like they've been in one of these is Winona Ryder. Although we're not talking about the Ashes, she is a bloodline family, a 60s hippie cult family. Her middle name was named after Aldous Huxley's wife, Laura.
Oh, right, I remember that.
Winona, Laura. So they were best friends with the Huxleys. I think they were living on a trail in some sort of cult in the 60s with their parents.
Sorry, Fatty, we talked about this, I think, with Mark, because I was saying, have you seen that footage where she has the award? This is the one I was talking about, where, I mean, look at how she's behaving.
That guy's hands on her shoulders, though. It's creepy as hell, isn't it?
Yeah. Really, like, he looks like he knows what's going on with her, but he's not even looking at her face. But keep watching her face. She looks batshit. And I recently, me and my missus watched Beetlejuice 2. I like the first one, the second one's shite. And she's in it, and she acts like that in it. She's actually acting like, I mean, in that Stranger Things, I think that is kind of part of a character, isn't it? That she's a bit, but she looks batshit, doesn't she?
Absolutely. Why is that guy holding on to her? It's...
I don't know. Is that some kind of mind control thing that he's trying to keep her under control? Some kind of
maybe
trigger,
or to reassure her, kind of thing.
But why? What I'm trying to say
everybody,
is,
get off everybody.
She's mind controlled, right? Or whatever's going on. But why? What purpose have they got out of her being MK'd? You know what I mean? That's why it's something that we'll never understand.
She was a massive
kick they get out of.
But she was a massive famous actress in the 80s, wasn't she? She was.
Yeah.
And she kind of vanished for a while, didn't she?
Yeah.
Mm.
She went out with Johnny Depp as well.
Her favourite book, she's been talked about, is Catch. Is Catcher in the Rye.
Oh, God.
I don't know anyone whose favourite book that is, do you?
No.
I've never read it.
It's awful.
Have you read it, Matt?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I did read it. It's actually, I say it's, but it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. It was okay. It was all right.
A Godfather was Timothy Leary, wasn't it? A Godfather was Timothy Leary.
That's right. Yeah.
And her parents were best friends with Philip K. Dick and Allen Ginsberg.
Yeah. So that countercultural milieu, if you like, the 60s icons all mixing together. She was in that sort of world.
How strange. She's in Stranger Things and she's giving off. She was around people who was around the MK Ultra program, and she's giving off huge symptoms or looking like she was part of that program. And she's in Stranger Things, which was about MK Ultra. That can't be a coincidence. Anyway, I'm sick of saying it's a coincidence.
Coinky dink. Bertrand Russell, this grandfather of the 60s counterculture, this prophet and priest of 1960s permissiveness, and a bloodline relative of Margaret Elliott, mother of Jane Asher, of course, was directly related to the Russell bloodline of the Duke of Bedford, whose family line goes back hundreds of years to the English town of Tavistock. And it was the 11th Duke of Tavistock who donated a building in 1920 to what became donated a building for the founding of what was the Tavistock Clinic, which later became the Tavistock Institute. So just to remind ourselves, for the sake of context, how Bertrand Russell is related to Jane Asher's mum. They're cousins. Bertrand Russell and Jane Asher's mum are cousins. So if we go back a few generations to somebody called Henry Augustus Dillon Lee, who was the 13th Viscount Dillon of Costello Gallin, one of his daughters, Henrietta Maria Dillon Lee, married Edward John Stanley. And the name Stanley is relevant, but we'll get to that at some other stage. But yeah, one of his daughters, Henrietta Maria Dillon Lee, married Edward John Stanley, 3rd Baron Stanley of Alderley. And one of their daughters, Catherine Louisa, married John Russell, Viscount Amberley, and they had 2 sons, and one of them was Bertrand Russell. A sister of that Henrietta Maria Dillon Lee, Louisa Anne Rose Dillon, married the Right Honourable Sir Spencer Cecil Brabazon Ponsonby Fane.
He's made that up.
Yeah. Oh, what's there? Hello there. And one
really
of their
nice
daughters,
ice cream man, was it?
And one of their daughters, Constance Louisa, married William Robert Phillips, whose daughter Claire Louisa married Edward Granville Elliot, who were the parents of Margaret Elliot, later to become Margaret Asher.
You know, it
Peter
took me,
and Jane's mum.
I know you know this because I mentioned it took me ages. That Phillips link was going back, 2023? When I started looking into that Jane Asher bloodline. That Phillips link was a door that opened everything up, because that's a prominent family as well.
Oh, right, okay. I haven't looked into them.
The Phillips turned into Phillips and all the other stuff. So, it was quite a prominent family. But they owned castles and stuff like that. I think down near Wales and
oh, right.
And one of their relatives, a Viscount, is. I'm sure he worked with Paul McCartney. Ironically, I mean, just a coincidence, Matt. Obviously.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
What was their What was the name? Do you remember?
Yeah, I'll while you're talking, I'll dig it out.
Okay. So in the last episode we did, we talked about Bertrand Russell, Paul McCartney, if you think that's Paul McCartney, claiming that he met Bertrand Russell. McCartney claims he was an admirer of Russell's writings and his work, and his ideas. So he decided one day that he would go and just knock on his door, visit him at his home in London. And he claims that when he met Bertrand Russell, that Russell brought him up to speed with what was going on in Vietnam at that point in time. And then McCartney then claims that he went back to the Beatles one day in the recording studio when they were working together and said, "Hey, I met Bertrand Russell the other day, and he was talking about Vietnam." And he claims that this kind of planted a seed in John Lennon's head and was kind of like the catalyst, if you like, that set John Lennon off later on in the 60s to become this famous campaigner for peace that he's pretty much now well known for. I don't know, but I would say that when people think of John Lennon, they not only think of the Beatles and music, but they probably also think of this part of his public identity, his brand, if you like. Part of that identity and that brand is John Lennon, the peace campaigner, if you like. So they don't only think of him as being a Beatle and music, but also, you know, his public campaigns for peace, songs like Give Peace a Chance, for example, and Happy Christmas, War is Over. So I
think of him more in that vein, actually, Matt, being, you know,
really?
Seeing him in the 80s. I think of him as in that white flared suit doing what they call it, because obviously I went around for Beatles, but I remember hearing about him getting shot and stuff, and it was, well, Imagine, that's what I remember him for. Imagine, more than anything else, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So this meeting between McCartney or whoever it is and Bertrand Russell has been corroborated. We talked about this in the previous episode we did. It was corroborated by someone by the name, I think his name was Ralph Sherman, and he was Russell's secretary. And he claims he was the one that opened the door when McCartney came and popped by and knocked on the door. He was the one that opened the door and let him in. Thing is, though, there are when I was talking about this in the previous episode, I think I said at the time that there were varying accounts as to when this meeting happened. Some reports claim it was 1964, some 65, some 66. I think I was leaning more towards 1964 in the last episode. I don't know. I haven't listened back to it enough to notice since then, but I think I was leaning more towards 1964. But depending on what version of events you go with, whether it was 64, 65, 66, the Vietnam War, I would suggest, wasn't yet at its height. And what I mean by that, it wasn't at its most controversial, its bloodiest, most controversial peak, if you like. And given that the UK, where the Beatles were based, wasn't actively involved militarily, I don't think it would have been a huge news story in the UK media at the time that McCartney would have met Bertrand Russell. I mean, the escalation of troops in Vietnam didn't actually begin until 1965. Before then, the Americans were over there, quote unquote, policing Vietnam. It wasn't till 1965, I think, when the troops actually began going in and it turned into a war footing. So it was still very early days. So there is a possibility that when McCartney said he went and told the Beatles about what Bertrand Russell had said to him and that it planted a seed in John Lennon's mind, it could very well be that he, that there is some validity to this, that they weren't that well in tune with what was going on at the time in Vietnam. Sure, the Beatles had gone to America on tours, concert tours in 64, 65 and 66, and they were aware of the Vietnam War because since we did the last episode, I've done a bit of digging, and there are press conferences where the press did ask them about the Vietnam War in 64, 65, 66, where the American media asked them what their views on it was.
Would any of you care to comment on any aspect of the war in Vietnam?
We don't like it. No? I've elaborated enough, I just don't like it. It's a small, it's obvious it's wrong, and that's all there is to be said about it. We can elaborate in England.
Basically, they weren't very vocal about it when people were asking them.
But these guys are 21-year-old or 22-year-old. They've got no interest in.
Yeah, they just said basically, yeah, war is bad. We don't agree with it, but they weren't getting. They didn't have anything eloquent to say about it. So what I'm trying to say is that yes, they would have known about what was going on in Vietnam, but they would have only known about it from a mainstream perspective. Okay, and Bertrand Russell, I would suggest, whether rightly or wrongly, what he probably told McCartney during that meeting was versions of what was going on in Vietnam that was against the mainstream narrative. Because at the time that this, in 1966, we talked about this in the previous episode we did, Bertrand Russell had formed what was called the Russell Tribunal. This took place in 1966, and it was a tribunal investigating alleged American war crimes in Vietnam based on reports from the region by people that were sent over there to investigate what was going on behalf of the tribunal. So it could be that what McCartney was telling Lennon and that what planted the seed was information that Bertrand Russell had, which wasn't in the mainstream. So maybe this is what prompted Lennon to think, whoa, wait a minute, this is actually heavier than I actually thought.
I mean, let's set the scene as well, Matt, because at the time, McCartney's living at the Ashes household.
Yeah.
That we have got strong information that Richard Asher was linked to some kind of mind control operation, British arm of mind control operation. He's waking up with songs in his head at that particular time, and he doesn't know where they've come from. That happened to be old Italian Neapolitan songs, some of them, as well. And then he's introduced to Bertrand Russell, who is Margaret Elliott's cousin.
Yeah. And the ashes do tie into this because what I've also found out since we did the last episode, I did a bit more digging. I came across this completely by accident. So, I found a website, and it's connected to the Spokesman Journal. Okay, and the Spokesman Journal is the journal of the so-called Bertrand Russell Peace Foundation.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. I say so-called Bertrand Russell Peace Foundation. So, yeah,
Is Tony Blair chairman?
He probably he's probably taken over since. Yeah, he's probably got a consultancy on there. So, yeah, I found an article on that website, an online version. It was an article, an online version of the Spokesman Journal. Okay. And it was authored by someone by the name of Tony Simpson, and it's titled "With the Beatles." And you can find this online; it's easy to find. So this is an article published by the Bertrand Russell Peace Foundation, and according to this article, there wasn't just one meeting between McCartney and Russell; there were two. The first was on June 18th, 1966. So Paul McCartney's 24th birthday. The second was a week later, and these took place at Russell's house, his residence in Chelsea in London. And from what I've read in the article, these meetings were documented in a diary, so we can pretty much take them as read, I suppose. They were documented in a diary, Bertrand Russell's then wife, in her diary, Edith Russell. And furthermore, I don't think we knew this before, correct me if I'm wrong, but on both occasions that McCartney went to meet Bertrand Russell, which led to this, you could argue this, what's claimed is the catalyzing moment that John Lennon decided to go towards the peace campaigning route. Accompanying him that day was Jane Asher. On both days, actually, on both occasions he went, Jane Asher was accompanying him on those visits.
Right.
So, okay, so she was his girlfriend. You might say, okay, well, maybe she went along because she was his girlfriend. But I just wonder whether she might have been there as well as some kind of handler kind of thing.
Introduction. Meet my uncle.
Yeah. So, and something else that I learned about this since we last did the last episode together from this website, from this article, is that it would appear that Bertrand Russell was looking not only to get John Lennon into the peace thing, but all of the Beatles. He was looking to get all of the Beatles involved in speaking out against the Vietnam War. According to this article, within the archives of the so-called Bertrand Russell Peace Foundation, supposed, there are two, what you would call in the movie business, treatments for a Beatles film, right? And these are in the archives, the Bertrand Russell archives. Treatments for a Beatles film. So in other words, rough drafts of a film, the idea of which is centered around the anti-Vietnam War message. So basically, an anti-Vietnam War film starring the Beatles and Bertrand Russell. Okay, you can find these online. If you read the article, the author of the article actually gives you some samples from the scripts.
Right.
I've got one here. Picture the scene, okay? The Beatles this is part of the script. The Beatles are seen in Liverpool walking around the districts of their childhood, reminiscing about school days, places where they played as kids, etc. They will remember how tough things were, but also the fun, the zest of people's lives. Dissolve, imagine, picture the scene, dissolve to Bertrand Russell's house in Wales, the drawing room. The Beatles troop in and are greeted by the old man. They represent different centuries. They stand at the opposite ends of the traditional British social scale. The boys are creators of the wry vernacular poetry of a new generation of youngsters. Russell is the greatest living representative of an aristocratic intellectual tradition, but they are united in a common respect for the decency, the inviolability of ordinary humanity. This is from the script. This isn't me talking. I don't talk. All right. Yeah. So that's one rough draft of a Beatles song. There's two, and the other one goes under the title "Beatles and Vietnam." And there's also, if you read this article, there's an excerpt of a letter that the Bertrand Russell camp sent to Paul McCartney in 1966 discussing this film, how to take it forward. But, of course, it never happened. Maybe it did, though. I was thinking maybe it did. Maybe they did film it and it's sitting in some archive somewhere.
Quite possibly, yeah.
You know? And I wonder whether Jane Asher would have starred in it as well. You know? But yeah.
I mean the whole Asher connection, as we did those two releases with Mike, showed that the connection weren't just that he were his girlfriend, but I mean that's something we'll get into in a later episode.
I will say, right, I looked into Bertrand Russell like you two have, but looking on his Wikipedia, fucking hell, the amount of accolades he got. And
yeah.
Where, I mean, is he part of the satanic? I mean, we might have talked about this before, I can't remember. Is he part of the satanic bloodline family, Russell? Is it? I'm guessing.
He's part of. He's got the Plantagenet and all that ancient.
Out of everyone we've looked at, right, he's the most pushed up there. That I think
he's the leader.
Yeah, I've ever seen. He even got a Nobel Prize in Literature, but it didn't actually say what he wrote. Just as in recognition of his varied and significant writings.
Eugenicist.
But you think if you've got a Nobel Literature Prize, there'd be like something that got you that prize. It's just that he just got one because he's really good at writing.
He got it for being a eugenicist, stopping nuclear war, but wanting to cull the population down without using nuclear weapons. Yeah, biologically.
But I mean, he was a mathematician, an author. He got everything, hasn't he?
Yeah, but you need to be a mathematician, don't you, to work out how many people to keep alive and how many to kill.
But do you think he's, for instance, Elon Musk keeps going on about how many people, the population's collapsing, and they bull him up, for instance. I'm using him as an example, and he's telling everybody, and he's telling us how bad it all is and what's going to happen with AI and all this stuff, and he'll put this chip in your head and we'll be able to control and make you have a happier life. And he's saying the same thing, but 60 or 70 years ago.
But he's saying it more blatantly, isn't he? Yeah. I mean, those speeches I read earlier where he's saying, we'll cull some people off and we'll keep but for the powerful minority. I mean, how much more blatant can you be?
Well, but I suppose, Matt, you've got to be a bit more like, if you compare him to Elon Musk, that if he said that, that'd be instantly worldwide, wouldn't it? Whereas you've dug that out, haven't you?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, Chris, go on.
No, I'm going to say there's pictures of him at Trinity College in 1891. There's pictures of him everywhere. This is one guy who was...
But if you think of him, Chris, and George, I'll use George Orwell as an example. There's no video footage of him. There's no recorded evidence of him. There's no... all the pictures are the same pictures you see of him with that BBC microphone. I know there are other ones, but... there's no... Do you know, like... Aldous Huxley did videos and talks and lectures and things. George Orwell, to say how important he was supposedly, never did anything like that.
No. And there's, I think this is the longest Wikipedia I've ever seen of a person.
Oh, he's absolutely revered. Like I said at the beginning, he's absolutely revered. He's worshipped. He's seen as this great philosopher,
a genius.
A man of love and humanity and universal peace. And,
to the point that, can you remember the guy, Sir Humphrey Wakefield, who was Dominic Cummings' father-in-law? Remember, he was talking with them Geordies, and they said, "Give me an example of a bloodline, blah blah blah." And he said Bertrand Russell, a genius. That's what he said.
Because of his bloodline.
Because of his bloodline.
The quality is everything, but in general, to be elitist, I think the quality climbs up the tree of life, and therefore, in general, high things in the tree of life have quality and have skills, and they get wonderful degrees at university, and if they marry each other, that gets them better again.
So you wouldn't have minded if one of your children had met someone from a lower socio-economic group who was intelligent and talented?
Intelligence and talent is lovely, but I want parents and grandparents who've had hands-on success. running their battles well and proving they're wonderful, because one is the subject of one's genes, and I think I like the idea of them being successful genes and winning through to successful puppies.
Some things haven't been in genes, though, have they? Like, there's been some outstanding people and geniuses who've been like first generation.
No, they aren't. Very few first generation geniuses.
Very few, but there's still few.
Like which?
Would they have been allowed?
That's what I mean.
Of course there are.
You're saying very few.
Normally, you think of Bertrand Russell, for instance. Okay, ancient family, Dukes of Bedford, Wittgenstein, ancient family.
But they never talk about all the mental illness that there are in these bloodlines. I mean, isn't it Aldous Huxley? There's been 1 or 2 suicides in that.
Yeah. Well, Aldous Huxley's brother, him and Julian were in a mental asylum at the same time. I forget what his brother was called. Was called Trevelyan or something like that. Anyway,
in an MK what fire?
An MK Ultra. well, at that point, there weren't psychiatric wards, were there? They weren't as friendly as that. There were them red brick.
One flew over the cuckoo's nest, but
asylums
worse than that.
Yeah, worse. Yeah, probably worse than that. Yeah. But the reason I wanted to mention Bertrand Russell in this episode again is not only because I've learned all this new information since we last did the last one, and it kind of solidifies McCartney's claims, if you like, that there was actually a meeting, and it might have actually, yes, provided the catalyst for John Lennon to go down a particular route. But I began asking myself after we recorded that episode, so what if Bertrand Russell did turn John Lennon on to becoming this peace campaigner? If there is a malevolent agenda going on there, how so? Because on the face of it, if you don't dig deep enough, if you just look at the outer facade, you would say, well, that's a good thing, isn't it? I mean, Bertrand Russell has turned this man on to campaigning for peace using his massive influence. You know, isn't that a good thing? So I began to think, well, how could that be? How if it is an agenda to a malevolent agenda, how so, right? And so the way I'm thinking is maybe John Lennon was just an ingredient because there was this rising because there was this rising dissatisfaction towards what was going on in Vietnam, and coming from a mainstream population as well, not from the younger generation, but also from the older generation as well. Maybe John Lennon was thrown in there along with other people in order to send people who were thinking that way, to send them down a cul-de-sac, if you like, towards a road where their protests could
like a fringe magnet, basically, to draw people in. Also, go on. Sorry, Chris.
No, I'm going to say, and also his meeting of him you could say led directly to his death.
Yeah,
you could.
Yeah.
Whether it was murdered by the system or by that guy, but if he was wiped out by the system, he's now peace protesting. Would have been the thing that got him killed, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I still do wonder whether John Lennon was. I'm not sticking up. I'm not trying to make excuses for him, but I do wonder whether he was genuine. He was genuinely altruistic, and he was directed through mind control and having certain people next to him all the time who took him away from that path.
I mean, that's not a bad segue into Yoko Ono, but
yes,
what I would say, John Lennon's supposed killer. He has an interesting bloodline that goes all the way through actors and politicians. Mark David Chapman's bloodline is a key link. It's off the charts. It's a key link. And so is Jeffrey Dahmer's and people like that. And so that brings you back around that. I mean, I don't know if Lennon's related to him because I've never looked at that side of it. But I mean, imagine, for want of a better word,
people.
But what we're witnessing is we're seeing I'll use Tom Hanks, the prime example. He's played two major film roles, one coming up, and he's actually played a relative, i.e., the Fred Rogers and Walt Disney are all great grandfathers, and now he's going to play Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln, his mother was called Nancy Hanks, a relative of Tom Hanks.
That you are related, in fact, to Abraham Lincoln. Your family is that true?
Yes.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Oh.
And what a trustworthy family to be related to Lincoln.
Yeah, no, Nancy Hanks was Abraham Lincoln's mother. So, yeah.
Look at that.
He's
How cool is that? I don't know if it would get you out of a ticket today, but I think it's very cool.
Yeah, wouldn't get me out of the ticket. It may explain the beard situation, though. I can get one of these really good. Not so much in here,
not so much
but
in the middle,
right in here.
just
Really,
through there.
really good, yeah.
All of this connection, we were saying on the phone the other day, Matt. This can't be a coincidence.
No, it can't.
You do some research, I do some research, coming from totally different angles, and they all plug into each other.
Yeah, it can't be. It's just too common. It's just too. Yeah. It keeps happening again and again.
Throwing
and
Mark's
again
research and other people's research.
Yeah, exactly.
Mike's research and whatever.
Dave McGowan. Dave McGowan. Because, funnily enough, Dave McGowan. I was just thinking, if you want to talk, I think his argument was, and I'd forgotten all about this until I read his Weird Scenes in the Canyon book again a few months ago. I thought I'd reacquaint myself with it, and I forgot that his main argument was, I think, that these psyop rock stars that were based in Laurel Canyon, what they were there to do was not only to send the younger generation, their fans, down this cul-de-sac, so effectively destroying any real, genuine, effective protest against the Vietnam War and the US government and various other policies. It wasn't only to do that, but to also destroy the reputation of the anti-Vietnam War movement that was already there. Because I think we mentioned this in the previous episode we did together, that in 1964, when America was involved in Vietnam, but not in a huge militarily kind of substantial way, when they were quote unquote policing the region, there were protests going on in America, but they were if I'm not mistaken, they were mainly on university campuses, and they were led by lecturers, students, faculty members, intellectuals, office staff within the university. It was all very middle class, very, very sort of regular Joe, and it's only later, when the so-called Summer of Love came along and all these hippies appeared, that all of a sudden the hippies are getting involved in the anti-war movement. And I think Dave McGowan's argument was that because the anti-war movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement did, and I think I mentioned this a few minutes ago as well, did come from this kind of blue-collar, very normal, regular kind of direction, the so-called powers that be wanted to discredit it. So what a good way of discrediting it than what better way is there than to throw in a load of hippies, right? That take drugs, long hair, scruffy, don't go to work, don't give a toss about a lot of stuff that the so-called establishment want them to take an interest in. Yeah. So anyone who's within the mainstream of society, who's looking in and isn't happy with what's going on in the war, with regards to the war in Vietnam, is looking at this and thinking, "Oh, I'm not getting involved. That anti-war movement, it's all about dirty, scuzzy hippies, And it's no, I don't want nothing to do with that." So, if that is true, what Dave McGowan was putting forward, maybe John Lennon was part of that.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got Timothy Leary telling people to turn on, tune in, drop out of protesting. That's what he actually said in an interview.
Do you mean Winona Ryder's godfather?
Exactly. So we go full circle. And then so you've got the pro-drug. So you've got two sides of the coin. You've got the one side of the coin, which is the pro-drug way of getting out of protesting against Vietnam. And then on the other side of the coin, you've got the anti-drug side of the coin. You've got with the Maharishi telling people to look inward. So you've got Leary telling people to look inward by taking acid. and not going and making an effective stand against what's going on in their in the country, in America. So look inward, forget about what's going on in Vietnam. And on the other side of the coin, the anti-drug side of the coin, you've got the Maharishi telling people to look inward and to meditate, transcendental meditation. And indeed, the Maharishi, it said, was pro-Vietnam War. So,
Matt, sorry, without being very, very obvious, you got a classic divide and conquer movement, and you've got all these students who were all intelligent and they're protesting the war, and then, like you said, they throw a load of dirty hippies into it, and then nobody. Hang on a minute, there were a legitimate protest going on here. Now, all these freaks that have turned up, I don't want anything to do with these. I'm not being associated with these. I mean, I'm sure we could find some in modern day protesting where they've done the same.
Yeah, definitely.
Made it look ridiculous.
Also, like Russell, going back to the Maharishis and the hippies, they are attacking it from both sides. Every time you look at this, they are trying to control it and control every angle of it to make it happen. So going back to Dave McGowan's book, Dave hit on a few other points as well, didn't he? Where the coincidence, although they were all military backgrounds, people will argue, just like they've argued that McCartney didn't meet with Bertrand Russell, even though they don't understand people like me and you. We stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning researching all this stuff like idiots. Anyway, but McGowan said, forget even he didn't say this, but forget even the military links. How did all these people with the same links meet up in the same place in the same year at the same time?
It's come on, this is what I was thinking this today, actually, when I was sitting in the garden for about 10 minutes. I thought, wait a minute, all these people that put their foot down on quote unquote conspiracy theorists, people like us that question the official narrative, and one of their arguments, or one of their main arguments, is, oh, come on, you're telling me that there's a conspiracy. Come on, give me your scenario. Why do you think there is? And you give them the scenario, and they say, oh, that's ridiculous. That would never happen. And I was thinking, wait a minute. So let's look at a mainstream version of something, a mainstream version of history that's happened, okay, in the past. And you think, and you look at it and you read it and you think, that's ridiculous. That's just as ridiculous as the conspiracy theory.
More ridiculous.
More ridiculous. You think, there's no way that could have happened,
What do you mean? We can't be slingshot to the moon by circling the Earth? What do you mean? Telephoning an astronaut using cables. Yeah, Nixon can actually phone on one of those big old plastic phones.
If politics is to become scientific, and if the event is not to be constantly surprising, it is imperative that our political thinking should penetrate more deeply into the springs of human action. What is the influence of hunger upon slogans? How does their effectiveness fluctuate with the number of calories in your diet? If one man offers you democracy and another offers you a bag of grain, at what stage of starvation will you prefer the grain to the vote? Such questions are far too little considered. All human activity is prompted by desire. There is a wholly fallacious theory advanced by some earnest moralists to the effect that it is possible to resist desire in the interest of duty and moral principle. I say this is fallacious, not because no man ever acts from a sense of duty, but because duty has no hold on him unless he desires to be dutiful. If you wish to know what men will do, you must know not only or principally their material circumstances, but rather the whole system of their desires with their relative strengths.